Why, hello there. I am sure that you are more than aware at this point that given our current situation with the coronavirus, most private and public music schools have changed to an online lessons program. Some are just remote lessons only. Some just offer that to kind of, balance out the cap on people being allowed to be in a certain building at a certain time. There's different ways of going about it, of course. As an instructor, I've personally received a lot of different mixed reviews from my students over the past 6 months with this because I've been focusing primarily on online lessons only. Some really enjoy the convenience of online lessons, where others prefer that kind of, one-on-one or real-time, face-to-face interaction that you get in the lesson room with your instructor, which I totally get. I personally remember taking, face-to-face private lessons with my vocal instructor in New York City in her private studio and just thinking like, wow, this is such a cool experience, because that's what it was for me. It wasn't just the information that I was getting, it was the atmosphere, it was the location, it was the interaction, and it was the dynamic between student and teacher. And it made that whole thing an experience, and a really positive one that I still remember to this day, which is great, which is fantastic. That said, I want to talk about a few things that you might not have thought about regarding how taking online lessons can be really beneficial. So today I'm going to give my top 3 reasons to consider online lessons. Here we go. So reason number 1 would be focus. I spent 9 years teaching at a very busy private music school, which was centered around performance. So what that means is that not only were private lessons going on, but group rehearsals at the same time. So it was very, very noisy, very chaotic throughout the week, most weeks, and just very, very busy. So there's a lot going on at any given moment. So if I can think back to teaching in this particular room in the school, I remember hearing super loud drums over my head, like over in the room above me. So it is me, and it is about 6:27 here at School of Rock, and this is my lesson room, and this is what I typically hear during this time every week with the drums, because there's no soundproofing. I'm just gonna let it kind of hang out here. And at any given time, there would be a group rehearsal going on in the basement right below me. And then if I heard to my right, I would hear my fellow guitar instructor, who would crank the amp. I have particularly sensitive hearing, so that's me. Not everybody's like me, but if you are the type who is easily distracted like I am, it can be an endurance test of sorts, just trying to maintain concentration and focus and to not lose the topic or the subject that you're trying to convey to your student. So there was a lot of that I was struggling with at this particular school. There was a lot of noise to kind of get around. And mind you, this was a school that was converted out of an old house. So very thin walls, very little soundproofing. There was a lot to kind of compete with, and you just kind of had to make the most of it. The reason why I say this is because I know for a fact that the flow of lessons got interrupted at times due to this distraction, which is something I never want to have happen. What I personally love about teaching online lessons is that, generally speaking, I'm at home and I have complete control of my environment. So what I mean by that is I'm not, competing with a full band rehearsal that's going on downstairs, and I'm not having to compete with the sound of loud drums that are literally right over my head or anything like that. It's tight. The worst is that if I have, loud neighbors outside, I can just close a window. It's not a big deal, right? So I have complete control over my environment. And if I were to go somewhere else, I could still make sure to be choosy in deciding a particular environment where I know I won't be distracted, to be able to focus that much more. All of this stuff makes me that much more efficient at doing my job, which is to be able to give the student a clear lesson and ultimately a good experience if I've done my job. What I've also discovered in working with students online is that the lessons themselves seem to be a lot more focused because the students themselves are a lot less distracted. It's kind of like we have a camera, it's just this view, there's nothing else to look around at. It's just kind of like that much more one-on-one. And what I mean by that is, teaching in certain schools and whatnot, especially the younger kids. I've taught 7-year-olds, and I can remember, 9 times out of 10, if I have a young kid who's sitting in the seat, they're gonna start looking around my room and checking out all the posters and just kind of like pointing at stuff while I'm trying to talk to them. Or they'll be like listening to the music that's going on in the background or in the basement or in the ceiling, wherever it's coming from. So what's great about the online aspect is that none of that is around, and the child has nowhere to look but straight into the camera, which is great. So hopefully that all makes sense. I feel like I can hear myself think more. I feel like I can do my job that much more efficiently. All this freed up energy that I was spending trying to compete with, loud noises all around me and whatnot, is now going towards explaining myself that much more clearly, or just little subtle things, seeing if the student gets it, trying to see if it's registering with them, making sure they retain it, all sorts of stuff like that. So more focused lessons seems to be what I'm noticing with all of these online lessons that I'm doing. Reason number 2, freedom of location. So I was mentioning this a little bit earlier, right? The freedom of location. If I choose to go somewhere, then I still have control over my environment. And that's what's great, is that it eliminates the need for going to a specific location every single time. It eliminates the commute, and ultimately it saves time. So I personally have taught private lessons in a ton of different locations. In addition to private music schools and in-home lessons and giving lessons in my own home, I've done some weird things in the name of commuting for education. I've biked from Boonton, New Jersey to Summit, New Jersey. So if you're in the area and you're familiar with those towns, that's almost 2 hours on bike. And when I say bike, I mean bicycle, because I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but it seemed like an adventure, so I went for it. So I biked from Boonton to Summit just to give a vocal lesson. I kind of wanted to see if I could pull it off too. There was that element of things as well, but things you have to do when you don't have a car at the time, I guess, right? Speaking of that, I've also gone as far as to travel from Montclair, New Jersey, where I used to live, into Manhattan via train to meet up with a student to give a lesson on a park bench on music theory. And then I know that kind of sounds romantic and whatnot, but it's a pain, right? That's like an hour out of your day just to get there. This student was great though, so it was totally worth it for me. But the reality of this is that commuting is just time taken out of your life that you can't get back. It's as simple as that, right? So what I love about online lessons is that as long as you have a steady internet connection and your instrument of choice, then you virtually have complete freedom of location, as long as you find an area where you can concentrate, like if you're like me and are a spaz and you need complete silence to hear yourself think and whatnot. It no longer matters if you're on vacation. It no longer matters if I'm on vacation or if I'm on tour or if I'm, wherever. It doesn't matter. If schedules line up, you can continue the lessons wherever you are, which obviously is never the case with face-to-face lessons. Another thing to mention about this that is probably pretty obvious, but it's worth mentioning, is that you no longer have to worry about a commute, right? So let's just be conservative and say that you live 15 minutes from a music school and it's a really easy commute. You drop off your son or your daughter for guitar lessons maybe once a week. So you have to factor in that that's a half hour total each week that you're taking out of your day to make sure that they get back and forth from the lesson, right? Or you're having to coordinate somebody else to pick it up. Either way, it's gonna take some finagling. And I understand that this is totally manageable for most parents and it comes with the job of being a parent, but bear with me for a second. Obviously, it goes without saying that you have to structure your entire day around that part as well, right? If it were me, it would be like, okay, so I have to go pick up my kid from the school at like 4:30, so that's when I'm gonna do all my grocery shopping as well, because I don't wanna go out a second time or a third time, whatever, to do this. And then I gotta go, take the dog to the vet, and I gotta do this and that. So there's a lot of scheduling that has to revolve around that as well, right? Another thing that I see is that parents will sign up their child for multiple lessons a week, which is awesome. I think that's a great idea to do, especially at a young age, to expose them to as many different instruments as possible. But that can be a scheduling nightmare on both ends, right? Like I've seen how certain parents want to have their son or their daughter just have all of their lessons in the same day, just because it makes it easier on them and their schedule. And I've seen on the other end where management might try to accommodate, but the reality of the situation is that their favorite instructor is only going to be around for 1 day a week, that type of thing. So on top of that, obviously it could lead to more time taken out of your schedule to drop them off and pick them up and drop them off and pick them up at different days during the week. It all depends. So considering online lessons might be good because it could free up some time that would be better spent in maybe a more productive area. Maybe you're working on a business, or maybe you just want to spend more actual quality time with your family. There's that. Anyway, I think I've made my point. And finally, the third reason to consider online lessons. This one in particular is one of my favorites as well. It's the ability to record the lesson. So by this point, I'm sure you noticed that I tend to talk quite a bit. Both music and teaching are things that I'm extremely passionate about, so a lot of words start flying at students' heads when they're in the lesson with me. I do try my best to make sure that they're as engaged and participating as much as possible, but the reality of certain situations sometimes means that if I am explaining a specific topic, that requires me to really break things down to get the student to understand. So there could be a lot of dialogue happening. What I really, really love about online lessons, and using Zoom in particular, I use Zoom for my online lessons. Zoom has the function to be able to record the lesson. So this is amazing for so many reasons. One being, you have a copy of the lesson that you can go back to and reference anytime you want, as many times as you want. You know, maybe you're with a teacher and they've talked a bunch about a specific subject and you understand it, but you didn't want to miss anything that was said. And in any conversation, right, if it's not recorded, there's plenty of things that could get lost. So that's one of the beautiful things about this, is that if you record the lesson, you can go back and reference it again and again and again. You might even find that you discover little new things each time you reference that material. So that in and of itself is great. The other thing too is that it's a system of accountability as well. Again, I teach younger students a lot, and I'll have some that come in and say that they forgot what the lesson was supposed to be. I'll say, did you practice last week's lesson? And they'll give me the whole like, oh, I forgot what it was. And then you can just say like, really? Well, I recorded it. Did you watch the recording? So that will keep them honest. Just saying. So in closing, I just want to say that obviously there are pros and cons to either type of teaching, whether it's in-person lessons or online lessons. Both have their strengths, both have their weaknesses. Everybody's different, and of course, it's on you to figure out what is going to be the best fit for you as far as what your educational needs are. But given our current situation, I just want to shed some light on some of the benefits of remote learning, just to make you aware of it if you weren't before. And speaking of that, if you have any interest at all in working with me remotely, feel free to send an email to fastermusiccreation@gmail.com just to get the rates and my availability and all of that good stuff. And I'm just wondering, do you have any other hangups about remote lessons? Do you have any other concerns or confusions or curiosities about it? I personally would love to know. So let me know in the comments. I would love to answer any questions that you might have about it. Thank you for watching.